scalars which are A, B, C and E, and if you so these 4 scalars, they are basically responsible for formation of what we call matter in the real sense. Okay. So by matter I basically means all the standard model fields, matter, radiation, everything, as well as dark matter. Okay, so whatever we call matter, that is basically given the 4 scalars, and at the same time you forget about, you just neglect those vectors. So you have 2 tensors which basically result in gravitational waves. So now what we did is that, first of all, what we can do, first of all, so these 4 scalars, we can now write down del G mu nu explicitly. But we tried to make our life little bit simplified. Okay, so we tried to impose some gauge conditions over there. And as we said, this method, basically you have 2 prescriptions of imposing gauge conditions. Number 1 is, first you can choose a specific gauge and you can work on that. Okay. And number 2 is that instead of choosing a specific gauge, what you can do is that you can define first of all some gauge invariant quantities. You guarantee that they are gauge invariant. So you can define those gauge invariant quantities. And in terms of those gauge invariant quantities, you calculate also. Okay. So you can proceed in either way and you will end up at same calculation. But it appears to be shown that this second method basically leads to more physical insight. So I am basically focusing on this. Okay. So if I define 2 gauge invariant quantities, then as you can see that these 4 parameters, basically 4 unknowns, they basically lead to 2 unknowns. Okay. Okay. So what are those 2 unknowns? As he is basically trying to have this explicit expression, the explicit expressions are these. One is phi and psi, and these are called body potential, as I have already discussed. So this is, the explicit expression is just like this: A plus B minus E prime. Prime is taken in terms of eta, okay? Plus H, I have already defined H. H is once again not by A, but A prime by A rather, okay? In terms of eta. H into B minus E prime. This is equation number 1. So this is my expression for phi, and the expression for psi is simply C minus H. Okay, so are you happy? Yeah. Okay, fine. So this expression, yes, of course. I mean, so if you want to do calculations, then these are also important. Okay. So if we define these 2 parameters, then what you can say that with these potentials, you can write down for scalar the part of metric in terms of this thing, which basically looks like d square equals minus, d square is a square eta into minus 1 plus 2 psi d eta square plus 1 minus 2 phi del xi d xi. So now your life is a little bit simple. You have just 2 parameters sitting over here, and you can calculate del G mu nu from here for matter. So I have given you those explicit calculations, okay? And then what I said is that, so what you will do is that, so now you can calculate for matter, you can calculate del T mu nu as well, okay? Considering that for del T mu nu you have fluctuation of a scalar fluid, you know for first order fluctuation of scalar fluid what should be the expressions. You can just put that value over here, and you can just equate them del G mu nu for matter with del G mu nu for scalar fluid. Okay, you can just equate them and extract phases. Okay, first and foremost. Secondly, what happened is that for gravitational waves, what you get, for gravitational waves, your calculations are much simple, because for gravitational waves, what you can see, since this is a scalar field for T mu nu, its tensorial fluctuation part is 0. Okay, so del T mu nu for tensor, that is already 0. See, if del T mu nu for tensor is already 0, what about the del G mu nu for tensor? What we did is for tensor del G mu nu is basically, so you have just one parameter left over here. For tensors, d squared is basically minus a squared into, sorry, this is not minus, delta squared plus delta Ij plus Eij bar dxi. And now what we did is that we further wanted to extract physics out of that, and that's why we basically wrote this Eij tensor as a linear combination of 2. So since Eij bar is a transverse traceless component, okay, we can decompose into one transverse part and another traceless and we can write it as a linear combination of them. Okay. So if I write that down, then this becomes basically H plus epsilon ij plus, and this is my H cross epsilon ij cross, and this Eij bar is a linear combination of them. Okay. Where these two are the two polarization directions, they are basically polarization tensors. Okay, and which basically confirm that in CMB you do have polarizations, okay, which are basically reflected in CMB in form of E and B modes. Okay, so if I do all this thing, then my life is much more simple, and I have just left with only one equation for tensor fluctuation of G mu. Okay, and what is that equation? That equation I have already given. Okay, so forget about that thing. So now my job is to equate that with del T mu, which is also 0. Okay, so if I do all these things, at the end of the day, what you get is that. So as I said, so I have basically, if I explicitly write them down, I have three power derivation equations for matter. Okay, for del G 0 0, for del G 0 I, and for del G Ij. Okay, so I have three power derivation equations for matter and one power derivation equation actually for gravitational waves. If I decompose that into H plus and H cross, then I have basically two power derivation equations. Okay, I just decompose that. So now what I say is that I just do some mathematical jugglery over here. So what I do is that just with the analogy of classical fluid dynamics, and this is what I'm so if you want to do, so like I think it has already discussed this thing. So during matter dominated era, if you want to consider power derivation, then what you can do is that you can do a Newtonian approximation. You can consider that so whatever matter you see, that is basically made up of a perfect fluid. Okay, so if this is a fluid, there are small fluctuations, you can identically write down your Euler equation, Poisson equation, and equation of continuity in curved space, which are exactly identical to your whatever you get in fluid dynamics. Only difference is that here the mathematical expressions are a little bit difficult because you have curved space sitting over there. And you can combine these three to form a single second order differential equation, which is what I call Navier-Stokes equation. Okay, so similar thing happens over here. You cannot get the insight directly from those del G mu equals del T mu, but if you combine them, whatever you get, that is basically your Navier-Stokes equation in curved background. Okay. So now what you can do is that you can readily identify that equation basically gives you an oscillatory kind of solution, but with some kind of damping. Okay. So now you can, what you can do is that you can just do some parameter transformation. You can identify new parameter which basically makes your life even simpler, and you can write down finally at the end of the day that for scalar perturbation, the equation turns out to be in terms of this new parameter. So this is the starting point today. That is why I'm just explicitly writing them down. Okay, so z double prime by z v equals 0. And for tensors, once again, whatever you get once again a second order equation, and once again you define a new parameter. With respect to that parameter, your equation for tensors also look just like this, that q double prime minus del squared by k double prime by t. So these are the two equations in terms of new variables. So in turn, if you want to, so these equations, they are basically called Bukhanov-Sasaki equations. Okay, they are nothing but, from mathematical point of view, they are nothing but parameter. The solution is nothing but parametric oscillator. Okay, an oscillator whose frequency is basically changing. Okay. So now what you can do, if we want to solve these equations, you can readily say that the solution is parametric oscillator. We know the solution. Okay. So in principle, you can find out V and U, and if you can find out V and U, we can just track back and we can find out the initial parameter. Okay. So at the end of the day, we can extract from the physics out of it. So now the basic question is that what I discussed till now is the reason, is basically the effect, but I did not discuss the cause. Okay, so this is the point I am going to discuss today. So today I will discuss from where these equations actually arise. Okay, and you will see that I will first of all I will consider for the fluctuations of inflator, and from there I will generate these equations at the same time. So these two scenarios are consistent. Okay, cause and effect, they basically lead to same physics, and that should be okay, so that you can convince yourself that you are actually on the right track. Okay, fine. So So today I will discuss quantum fluctuations. Okay. So, fine. Okay, so let me start from here. So as I said, I have already for that quantum field or whatever you call it, inflaton field, I defined the Lagrangian. With that Lagrangian, I will just write down the action right now. Okay. So the action for which is called Einstein-Hilbert action. Okay. So for unperturbed background, so Einstein-Hilbert action for a scalar field minimally coupled to gravity. Okay. So what is that? So basically, what you do is that you have that action, you vary that action, and that should lead to your Einstein's equation. Okay. We have not done that intermediate steps. Okay. So your Einstein-Hilbert action for a scalar minimally coupled to gravity rather. What is this? That action? That action I can write down as minus mp squared by 2 d4x. If this is minimally coupled to gravity, then you have odd just sitting over here with minus integration d4x minus 3 into half. Yes, that's it. You have R plus this, so they are minimally coupled. So now what you do is that, so these basically these equations, so what you did, so is this point clear to everybody? Actually this was your starting point. You had this A and then you varied this A, which basically led to your G mu nu equals kappa T mu nu. Sorry? Sorry, I can't hear you. Which one? This part? This is mp square by 2. Oh, sorry. This should be something like this. Okay, so you just write that action which basically led to your. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. Yeah, actually mp square should be there. mp square should be there. So what happens is that, I mean, in most of the cases you consider mp square to be of the order of 1 and you just take it back. But I mean, so if I write it down explicitly, then it should be over here. Okay. So what I did is that I just varied that action and which basically I basically landed to this equation. So now what I said is that I am varying this delta G mu nu and this delta T mu nu. So that means which should actually come from variation of this action. Okay, so I am doing that part. So basically I am trying to come to the root of the problem. Okay. So what I am doing is that I am fluctuating, I am basically fluctuating this delta A and I am taking the first, yes? Okay, this is my convention. So whatever convention you can choose, okay. Either you can choose plus, you can be consistent, or you can choose minus, you can be consistent. Okay, there is no problem. So are you happy with this sign? Are you happy with this sign? I am also happy, no problem. So this is just in convention, but you cannot say there should be. Okay, because I can claim that there should be a positive sign and you will end up at same result.
I think this sign is not the convention.
No, this is not for sign convention, but if you consider plus or minus, finally what you get is that, so if you consider plus, you will get an equation. If I consider minus, I will get an equation with an overall minus sign sitting in the outside and the right hand side is 0. So that is done actually. Okay, but okay, once again, if you are happy then. Okay, so what I do is that I just expand it perturbatively. Okay, which should result in del G mu nu equals del T mu nu. Okay, so what I'll do is that if I expand it perturbatively, then its first order correction is given by, so I'm just skipping that part, I'm just doing final calculations. Okay, so its first order perturbation is given by d4x a4, this is my phi prime square by 2s square minus grad phi square by 2s square. Okay, so if I, so just, okay, so you can just forget about this part as well. Okay, since I have written it explicitly, let it be like this. Okay. So actually this result is important. This first order fluctuation basically gives you half integration d4x, this part is most important, d prime square minus del ij del iv del gv plus z double prime by z square. Okay, where V is what I have defined already out here. Okay, that V. So what about this part? Okay, so first, so this is for scalars. Okay, first and foremost. So this basically, this first order fluctuation basically leads for whatever result you get for scalars. Okay. So now what about this part? You can readily identify this part, can't you? This is the first order fluctuation for a massless scalar in flat background, isn't it? So this is the first order fluctuation for massless scalar in flat background. Okay. So this is all about curvature. The role of curvature is completely encoded over here because as we know Z basically takes care of the curvature. Okay. So this is all about curvature, and what is the physical role of this curvature? The physical role of this curvature is what? You have m into v square actually. So this part basically gives rise to an effective mass to the system. Okay, so all the role of the curvature is basically encoded in first order fluctuation, that is basically encoded in giving rise to an effective mass of the system. Okay, so this is the role of the curvature, which basically gives rise to an effective mass of the system. Okay, and that effective mass you can write down. So m effective square is your minus z double prime z. Okay. Before proceeding further, let me do a 2, that is second order fluctuation. So all I did is that I had my fluctuation, I had my initial axis A, I am just fluctuating it term by term, and I am just collecting those terms out. Okay. So if I collect the first order fluctuation, as I said, that first order fluctuation basically gives rise to what we call scalars. Okay, so whatever scalar we see during fluctuation of del G mu nu. Okay, and what is the result? Basically, first order fluctuation basically results in, so whatever you have for massless scalar in flat background, on top of that, you have an effective mass which is being generated due to the background curvature. Okay, so what about the second order fluctuation? So if I consider the second order fluctuation, then A2 will be let me write down this expression. Okay, so let me write down both the expressions because otherwise you don't get 20 power 4 integration d4x a square. We have in terms of Eij, we have Eij prime e power I j prime prime minus del K because you had your EIJ, right? You had your metric EIJ. Okay. So with respect to EIJ, you can write that this. In other words, if you decompose, so what I said, that all the tensor effects, they are encoded either in EIJ or in H plus and H cross. Okay. So if I write this down, if I want to write this down in terms of H plus and H cross, then this will look like minus mt square by 2 sum over m equals plus or cross integration d4x square by 2 mu w hn du. Contraction is not? IJ, oh, sorry, yes, thank you very much. This should be I, this should be J. Thank you very much.
So this is the term for the tensor part.
Tensor. Yeah, actually, second order perturbation basically gives you tensor, but that is what I am trying to say. Okay, so what happens is that you have this action, okay, and you just vary that action. You can find that the first order fluctuation results in scalar perturbations, and the second order fluctuation basically results in tensor perturbations.
Then what about the vector perturbation?
So that's what I say. Vector perturbations do not appear over here because they are so to say, they are negligible. They should appear if you want to calculate further, like higher order perturbations. Because as I said, so I'll come to the estimates, observable estimates. Okay. So what observation suggests is that you have this scalar power spectrum sitting over here. Power spectrum means for this moment you have the strength of scalar force. Okay. So you have the scalar perturbation power spectrum sitting over here. Tensor power spectrum is much below that, and vector perturbations are even much below that. Okay, so that's why I say when you fluctuate it, you are just perturbing. Okay, so every higher order term is negligibly small compared to the previous order term. So that's why I say the leading order contribution should be mass, should be matter. The next leading order would be tensors. So if at all vector perturbation should appear, they should appear from even higher order perturbations, which I'm not discussing. Okay. So what you have done is, I have written this perturbation in terms of our known quantity Eij, or if I want to break Eij in terms of this H plus and H cross, then this is the expression. But at the end of the day, we will be happy with this variable transformation. Like we had expressed everything this in terms of V, so we have to express everything in terms of U, because those equations look really tractable to us. Okay, so what I am doing is that I am basically expressing this in terms of U. So this gives you, forget about this, so this gives you and this just, so if you are just not bothered about the intermediate steps, like whatever intermediate step I was given for fluctuation of A, first order fluctuation of A, and whatever intermediate steps I am giving for second order fluctuation A, if you just want to concentrate on the final expressions right now, what you see is that this expression looks just identical to the previous one. Okay, so what does it mean once again? This is basically fluctuation for massless scalar in that background, and this basically gives rise to an effective mass squared, which is a result of torque. So if the actions look similar at this stage, you can readily identify that the equations for motion will look similar, and that is why we got just the similar equations for U and V. So this is the actual reason why I basically got that U and V, the same equations of U and V. because there is a step where you can get just identical values. Their expressions are different. U has got a different expression, V has got a different expression. But once you write them down in terms of U and V, then just the same actions. Mass term will be different because that is a double prime, this is a double prime by A and that is the double prime by Z. Fine. So, what is the mathematical advantage? So, you can just solve any one and extract physics out of that. Okay, so if you solve any one equation, you extract physics out of there, you can just put identical solutions for the second one, you can extract physics out of that. You don't have to solve two equations separately. Okay, and that's the trick. So now I am in a position to basically, so what I did till now is not quantum field theory but classical field theory. But as I said, inflaton is a quantum field. You don't have fluctuations into it unless it is a quantum field. Because as I said, you are having quantum fluctuations. So now you will have to really do quantum field theory. Okay, so you have to quantize these fields. So this is what you get classically, okay? But you will have to really quantize these fields. So if you want to quantize these fields, okay, so first and foremost, sorry. So let me not write them down because if you vary those actions, you will get those equations. You are convinced, okay? Okay, fine. So now what you do? You do quantization. So you do the standard canonical quantization business. I think most of you have little bit knowledge on quantum field theory. So you do this canonical quantization business. What you do? You define your canonical momentum and etc. Okay, and then do this commutation business, everything, and at the end of the day, what you do? You expand it into Fourier series and extract physics of it. Okay, so that is what I am trying to do. So what I am doing is that I am trying to quantize the situation. Okay, so what I do? First of all, I do this. I define this canonical momenta, which are phi v, which is del L v, del v prime, which is v prime, and similarly phi u, which is del L u, del u prime equals u prime. You understand the L difference in LV and LU, okay?
Yeah.
Because that is what given in action. The actions are different. So they basically satisfy these quantization conditions. What are the quantization conditions? The quantization conditions, I can write them down as V cap. So sometimes I will have this V cap and sometimes I will miss that one, but now right now basically I am doing this quantum business. So cap is explicitly over there. Eta x equal V cap, eta x prime. This equal to similarly u cap eta x, u cap eta x prime, and similarly I am just writing them down like pi and pi. So this is pi is first function, it's a function of eta and x, second is a function of eta and x prime. So pi v, and this is my pi u, all of them are 0. So this is one condition, and what is that? Cross terms basically that will give you delta functions. So this is the second condition. Okay. So the second condition is v cap phi v equals u cap phi u. This is equal to I delta. So these are the two quantization conditions, as we know all of us. Okay. So now what I can do is that I can now expand into Fourier series the initial u's and v's. Okay. So if I expand it, so up to this point is clear to everybody? Okay. I have not written basically explicitly this eta x and eta x prime etc. So first is for x and second is for x prime. This is implicit over here. Okay, fine. So now what I do, I expand this into Fourier series. If I expand u and v in Fourier series, then say for v, what happens is v you can write down as v eta x is 1 by 2 pi whole or 3 by 2 equation And exactly similar equation for u as well. U eta x. Okay. That will be, say, this part will be 1 by 2 pi cube. This will be d3k. For ak and ak star, I write, say, bk and here bk dagger. Is it clear? Okay, I'm just not writing down explicitly. Okay, is it clear, everybody? Okay, you will get just similar expansion instead of these indices ak and raising and lowering indices basically. Ak and ak dagger, you have two different things over there. Okay. So now you know that with this constraint that now this ak and ak dagger and bk dagger, they satisfy those commutation relations. Okay, which is obvious to us. Okay. So if I do this, at the end of the day, what I get is that for kth Fourier mode, so what I have done basically, I had the equation of motion for u and v. I am trying to quantize it. The usual prescription of quantization is to expand it into Fourier series with the commutation relations. Okay, so that at the end of the day, you can write down your equation of motion as the kth Fourier mode. Okay, this is what is important because as I said, why I am doing this thing? As I said, basically, what is the background? The background is that you have quantum fluctuations of phi in terms of phi k, and they are basically emitting waves with wavelength lambda k. Okay, wavelength lambda k. So each one of them are evolving differently, separately. Okay, one is moving with some lambda, another is moving with another lambda, and third one is moving with another lambda. So I will have to treat them separately because the wavelength which it emits, basically with the same wavelength it will re-enter. Okay, so they will re-enter at different era. So I will have to pick them up by hand, so to say. So that is what I am doing. I am not treating the whole v and u. So what I could have done is I have this parametric oscillator equation for v and u. I could have tried to solve them explicitly directly. But doing that will not do because that will basically give you the summed up information. Okay, but that is not what is physically relevant. Physically relevant is that part which basically re-enters at correct era. Okay, so that's what I am doing. I am explicitly writing them down in terms of Fourier modes, and I am just collecting those modes which are basically physically relevant for us. Okay, is the logic clear why I am doing so? Okay, so if I do all this thing, what you can do is that at the end of the day, you can write down your Mukhanov-Sasaki equation in terms of these Fourier modes and those equation of motion. So basically, I am writing down the equation of motion for kth Fourier mode. Okay, they look like Vk double prime plus, you had this del square, you have expanded it into Fourier mode, so what will be there? So you have k square minus z double prime by z into Vk, this is equation 1, and the second equation is uk double prime plus k square minus so now you can explicitly check that this indeed gives you parametric oscillator because when this term was absent, this gives you a simple harmonic oscillator. But since this is this, so now you can write down this omega k squared as function of k at the same time and effective mass. So this actually shows you that you do have a parametric oscillator kind of solution. Okay, or if I want to write it down in terms of parameters sitting over here, then this, so even if this is effective mass square, I know, but from mathematical point of view, this should be eta because these are functions of eta. Okay, so this basically gives you an effective mass, so this gives you a parametric oscillator kind of solution.
How can you be sure that this expansion project space is how can you be so sure that K is sitting at both the places in Fourier space? It is the same case. In Fourier function of u and v.
No, this K is running. As I said, this K is running. Okay. K. So you could have. So this is a dummy index actually. Instead of K, you can write it as P. Doesn't matter because this is a running index. Here you have all the complete information. Now, if you solve this, then you will get separate information for each individual K, and then you will collect those Ks, but those informations which are re-entering horizon during a specific. So you can write it down as P. Doesn't matter. Okay. So now, what is my job? My job is now I am in a position to solve these equations actually. Okay, to get the solution. So to get the solution, what we need? We need to have the expression for this. Okay, unless you can have the expression for this, I cannot get the complete solution. So let us do this business that if you assume slow roll, let's get back to our good slow roll business, because as I said, I will show you from observational point of view that slow roll is basically strongly supported from observation. Okay, so let us constrain ourselves in slow roll. Slow roll basically guarantees that the evolution of the universe will be of quasi-exponential nature. Okay, what do I mean? So let us get back to your what I say, cosmological constant. At that time, what was the expansion? E power ht. So that was perfectly exponential. So now, if in scalar field you consider slow roll, then the evolution is pretty close to e power ht. Not exactly equal to e power ht, but the evolution is pretty close to e power ht. And from observational point of view, this is what is being supported. Okay, so this is called quasi-exponential. So slow roll guarantees basically quasi-exponential inflation. Okay, what is the advantage? Because if I have this quasi-exponential, then these mathematical expressions are highly simplified. Because for quasi-exponential, the eta basically evolves almost equal to 1 by h eta. Can you understand this? So let's get back to our standard h. Okay, can you understand this? Okay, so that's fine. Is 1 by h eta, which guarantees that if you put the expression of a and z over here, this guarantees that z double prime by z is almost equal to a double prime by a. Once again, your life is simple. They are just identical solutions. So now for scalars, you have mass. For vectors, you have mass, and they look just the same. So far as you are dealing with slow roll, and as I said, fortunately enough, our observation strongly supports this rule. Okay, fine. So now you can solve because you have your eta which is this, so you can derive a double prime by a, put it over here, and the same value for z double prime by z, you can put it over there. Sorry?
There will be a constant.
Sorry?
Some constant into
Yeah, that's why I say this is of the order of. The functional form is similar, okay? Okay, so now you can solve it. I'm just giving the solutions. The solutions are Vk equals C1 equals minus I k eta 1 minus I by k eta C2 equal I eta 1 plus I by k eta. This is for Vk. And for uk, what we will do? For uk, the solutions will be some C3 into sen plus C4 into sen. So now our job is just the mathematical part, that is to determine C1 and C2 by normalizing conditions. Okay, so let me do that thing very quickly. Okay, so you just put normalization condition, and the normalization condition is this. So this is the normalization condition, like Vk star Vk is equal to 1, and same for uk and uk star. Okay, and limit, another condition is eta tending to minus infinity. Sorry. Okay, Vk is or minus I eta by root 2k, which basically tells you C1 equals 1 by root 2k and C2 equals 0. And similar for u. Okay. So this is what I call, this is for u and this is for u. So these are the two conditions, one is normalization condition and another is limiting condition. Eta tending to minus infinity, do you understand? That is the earliest possible time, because eta during inflation, eta basically t runs from 0 to some value, means eta runs from minus infinity to 0. Okay. So if you put these two constraints, then at the end of the day what you get is Vk. So these two constraints basically put these two terms are gone. These two terms are gone. Okay, you are just left with C1 which has got this value. Okay, and the solutions are Vk equals 1 by root 2k I by k eta. Okay, and similarly for uk. So now, actually these are the modes which basically exit horizon. As I said, okay, so I have never proved it. Now this is the proof. As I said, you have quantum fluctuations. Okay, and those quantum fluctuations will give rise to wavelength lambda k. So to that wavelength, the associated modes are this. So these are the modes which basically exit horizon during very early time. Okay, and you finally capture some of those modes during different data. Okay. So these are the modes basically they exit horizon. And this, if anybody is interested, this is basically called Barnes-Davis backbone. Okay. As I said, I mean, during inflation you will have to choose different initial conditions, which basically, so I have chosen some initial conditions. No? These initial conditions basically fixes C1 and C2 and everything. If I choose a different initial condition, that will lead to different result. Okay. Now this Barnes-Davis initial condition, what happens is that this is the widely accepted initial condition in cosmology. Okay. So these modes basically exit horizon, and what I will have to do, I will have to finally collect them during horizon re-entry and cast them in CMB. Okay, that is what is important, because unless we can cast it in CMB, we cannot estimate them. Okay, that is what is important. Okay, and here you will see that a magic will appear. Okay, so let's see. Okay. Sorry? Actually, what you have done basically, you have basically expanded it into Fourier series. Okay, and you have basically whatever you have expanded, basically what happens is all these modes basically they exit horizon during that time. Whatever mode you have, okay, all of them basically exit horizon. And I am writing down in Barnes-Davis vacuum only to guarantee that all those modes basically exit horizon. Okay, so now as I said, so what I said, so let me just write it down. So this was the horizon size. Okay, okay. You can find out the wavelength associated to this. How can you find out the wavelength? Because you can put this value into your Mukhanov-Sasaki equation, find out the frequency, from there you can find out the wavelength. Okay, so if you find out the wavelength, you can see that that wavelength A lambda K, okay, that is greater than H inverse for each and every. Okay, so you guarantee that if you choose Barnes-Davies vacuum, then all the modes basically exist. Okay, so no matter whether this is of this size or this is of this size or this is of this size, every mode, there is not a single mode which is of this size during that time. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Okay. So that's it. And now what happens is that your horizon size is not like that you can capture everyone. Okay. After inflation, your horizon size looks just like this. So you can capture these modes only. These modes are still remaining outside horizon. You are not just bothered about that thing. Because whatever you see are these modes only. Okay. So during horizon re-entry, that is what I will show. During horizon re-entry, you will see that those modes which basically re-enter horizon, they basically appear as large scale structure. I will show that thing. Okay. Barnes-Davies vacuum. Okay. Okay, so let me do a little bit. So do you know about this 2-point correlation and everything? Has it been discussed? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what is 2-point correlation function? To be very simple, if you assume that the distribution is more or less Gaussian, okay. So 2-point correlation basically gives you. So if you have a value over here and if you have a value over here, you just want to relate these two, okay, and the relation is basically given by 2-point correlation function. So if you can relate them with a single function, then this is called 2-point correlation function. If you have somehow another point and you have to relate them with 3 values, then this is called 3-point correlation function. If instead you have 4 values, then this is called 4-point correlation function, and so on and so forth. What happens is that 2-point correlation function, which basically leads to Gaussian distribution, is the most important thing in cosmology. You can actually calculate higher point correlation functions which are related to. So this is what I will define a physical parameter which is called power spectrum, which appears from 2-point correlation function. And this power spectrum is the direct estimate of the strength of a quantity, cosmological parameter. Okay. And if you consider higher point correlation functions, there are lots of statistical business going on here. Okay, so if you consider higher point correlation functions, they will lead to what you call bispectrum and trispectrum and so on and so forth. And they are basically estimates of non-Gaussianity. Why I tell you this thing? Because this non-Gaussianity, this is a very important thing today. Okay, so why this is important? Because observationally, though you find that the distribution is mostly Gaussian, but there can be little bit deviation from that Gaussian distribution. Okay, and in early universe experiments, people are trying to find out how much amount of non-Gaussianity is there. Okay, so to calculate 3-point and 4-point correlation functions are very much important today. Okay, but just after saying this, I will focus on 2-point correlation functions right now. Okay. So what I am doing is that I am trying to find out the 2-point correlation function for those V modes. Okay, I am trying to find them out. What is the 2-point correlation function so that I will relate it with power spectrum. Okay, so if I calculate the 2-point correlation function, okay, which is defined as the vacuum for Vx1, say, and vacuum for Vx2. But these are my x1 and x2. This is my x1 and this is my x2. Okay, I'm trying to relate them. The x2 vacuum. If I write them, okay, I have those b's and everything sitting over there. So this is given by integration dθ for ik dot x1 minus x2 into a quantity which is the most important thing. So now, at the end of the day, we are in a position of measuring the quantity. So this is what we directly observe in CMB. After doing all those calculations and everything, we have actually arrived at a point where we can give a measurable estimate of the quantity. Okay, this is what I call power spectrum. Okay, so this is what we measure in CMB. And you can relate that thing if you measure that thing. So you have your VKs and everything sitting over there. You can find out PRK in terms of VK. Okay, so if you find that out, it turns out that PR is K cube by 2 pi square V by Z. And this equation is very important. This basically gives you crucial, so PRK. Sorry, this is a function of K. What does it say basically? So is the point here what I have done? I had the expression, explicit expression for Vk, okay? I just put that expression over here, I have integrated that thing out. And this quantity is basically this quantity. I have written it as PRK. Okay, so what it gives, first and foremost, what it gives. Before going into the rest of the case, first of all, what it tells. This is what? V is the reflection of inflationary models. Okay. So this is the reflection of inflation. This is the reflection of inflation. Okay. So whatever scalar field you choose for inflation, V is the reflection of that thing. Okay. And what is that? This is what you see in CMB. This is the power spectrum. And this equation directly relates your inflationary model with observations. So this is the first and foremost equation which directly relates with your, so whatever, so this in some sense plays some magic. What magic? So you have your last scattering surface sitting over here. This is your last scattering surface. Something was going on beyond that. What was going on? Okay. So the reflection of that thing is being carried through this. Reflection of whatever was going on beyond that, that is being carried through this. And that is being reflected on this last scattering surface through this. So that once you can estimate this thing, you can predict what happened earlier. And this is what people do actually. Okay, is this clear?
This is the particular VK.
This would be for particular, of course. Because this is also function of K. Okay. So now the magic happens. Up to this point is clear? So this point basically tells you nothing else. This point tells you whatever VK you can have, okay, you can estimate the power from them, and that power is basically is being reflected in CMB. You can measure that power. So once you measure that power, you can comment on VK because a different potential, a different phi will lead to a different VK. Okay, so different phi is basically lead to different VKs. So once you constrain this thing, you are basically constraining your inflationary model building as well. And that's why I say basically for inflationary model building, finding out those flow roll conditions and finding out the e-foldings is not sufficient. You will have to reflect everything in CMB. That will further constrain your inflationary models. So this is the first constraint you are putting on inflationary model. I will come to the exact values and everything and what are the other parameters later on. Okay. But before going to this, let me discuss the magic. Okay. So what is the magic? So as I said, you are basically collecting those modes which are basically re-entering horizon during specific epoch. Now, as you see that this quantum fluctuation, so one can claim at this point, so I mean, I expected this question, but nobody asked me this question, that you say, so actually I expected this question from the last presentation. You say these quantum fluctuations of inflaton, that basically results in large scale power. Okay, but when you call about quantum fluctuations, this should be pretty small. How come a very small quantity gives rise to a large scale particle, huge amount of particle? How can it happen? Because of inflation. So I will show you explicitly here that you actually have large perturbations from those small fluctuations because of this. Okay. So what happens is that, so if I considered, okay, so I had this expression for Pk and everything, okay, I have that expression. Now if I consider K 2 less than AH, okay, so I am considering those modes, so I had different modes which basically exited horizon. Now I am trying to kicking them up one by one. I am choosing those modes for which this condition is satisfied, those modes which are pretty small compared to H. Okay. So for these modes, you can show that PRK, that is of the order of H cross into H by 2 pi square. Okay, so these modes actually, they re-enter horizon, and this is pretty important, I'll come to that point. They re-enter horizon during radiation dominated era. No, this is for K2 less than A. And I'll just give the others in the time. I'll show you what happens. Okay. So let us take that thing. This is really easy. So these modes, so what I want to say is that for those modes for which the modes are 2 less than AH, they also re-enter horizon. But they re-enter horizon during radiation dominated era. Okay, so they become basically negligible. As I said, I started with that point that during matter dominated era you can have Jeans instability and everything which will basically give you some explanation of structure formation. Okay, but there is no such explanation for radiation dominated era. So whatever mode that enters during radiation dominated era, they become negligible. You cannot just estimate them, they are negligibly small. But for those modes who are basically 2 greater than AH, okay, for that mode basically you can express PRK as H cross into K by 2 pi A square. And these modes basically re-enter during matter dominated era. Okay, and these modes are significantly large as you have K sitting over there, K is huge. Okay, so these modes are significantly large. And they appear actually as large scale structures. So now you can relate it directly with matter dominated era. What happened? No. Then everything is lost. Why? No, you can calculate. You have that expression for PRK, right? I am not doing the intermediate steps. You have an expression for PRK, right? Okay, you have the. Yeah.
For horizon entry, A always should be yeah.
No. Horizon entry during which era? That is important. That is what I am trying to say. Horizon entry means nothing. Horizon entry at which era? That is important. Okay. During inflation, they can enter, depending on the value of K, they can enter horizon at different era. Okay. What was the scenario? The scenario was you had this inflationary era. Okay. Then you had 2 decelerating phases, and then your once again an accelerating phase. Okay. And there can be something in future. Now all these modes who have exited horizon, they have exited horizon during n equals 10, around this, n equals 10. Okay. And this is the end of inflation, which is around n equals 17. Now all those modes have exited horizon here. Okay. Depending on the value of K, they will re-enter either during this era or during this era, or even if you want to make it more exotic and more promising, then they can enter during this era, they can enter even in future. So now, for large scale structure formation, the modes which are relevant, which basically give rise to large scale structure, because since K is 2 melted, they will basically give rise to large scale structure. You can relate, as I said, you can have a ready-made explanation of large scale structure from genes in stability, which are basically appearing in matter dominated era. So those modes who have re-entered during this era, matter dominated era, they basically appear as large scale structure. Other modes also re-enter, but they don't appear as large scale structure. They are negligible small, who have re-entered during radiation era. And whoever mode will re-enter during the next era, we don't know about them. Then maybe some modes will re-enter after some time. We don't know about them. That's the point.
Since these are the modes of aberration, so they have some harmonic pattern. So we should look for some harmonic pattern of the matter distribution in the universe as it reflects.
I don't know. I don't know. So is the point clear to you, or you have still doubt left? Okay, so we can discuss it after the class. Okay, fine, no problem. So this is the issue. So if I forget about all this mathematics and everything, what I can say is just this story. That the explanation is just like that. You know explanation, this is matter dominated era, right? This is matter dominated era. You know an expression of structure formation over here. But you didn't know from where those fluctuations have arisen. This basically gives you that explanation that those fluctuations have arisen from the inflationary era, when all the modes exited horizon at very early end, and then they have re-entered a different era depending on their values of this. Okay, so if I discuss, I don't know, I don't have time to discuss post-inflationary quantum. If I discuss, which is basically CMB physics, if I discuss CMB physics, then I could have shown that for different era you will have different, so depending on your equation of state and everything, you will have different expressions which will basically, you can relate with these things. So I'm just skipping those parts. Okay.
One more question, sir. You said that this initial waves exited the universe at early time, but people said that there was nothing beyond that. So where did they exit?
What do you mean by people?
People
Are they cosmologists?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, they said there was nothing beyond that.
I don't know.
So where did this exit?
I don't know. I'm a cosmologist and I don't say this. And I don't know, I mean, the cosmologists I know, they basically don't say this. So there are lots of beliefs and everything. Don't mix up beliefs with facts. Okay. In science, you have to prove it or disprove
We
it.
asked another question that where did this expansion took place? Then they say
There is no answer to that question because this question is irrelevant actually. That is the answer. And so these questions, where did it, so this is a very, all popular, so this is a class 8 kind of question actually. I mean, this is a popular question, like you say that universe is expanding, but where it is expanding? There should be some outer space everything. This is a bullshit question, so to say. So please don't bother about these things because here the logic is different. You don't have something like a volume and everything. Whatever you call free space, that is basically acting as a three-dimensional surface. And you are basically extracting physics of that surface. So it's not like you have a volume which is expanding into a different volume or something like that. It's not like that. That is a school level question. Okay, but I'm not discouraging you. Okay, fine. But I'm just telling you that this is a myth, so to say. So I mean, this happened to be so, that happened to be so. This is a myth. So, but in science, you will have to either prove something or disprove something. Unless you can do that thing, you cannot say. Okay, fine. So at the end of the day, what I was talking about, okay, so let me just finish this part. Okay. So what I was talking about that, so what message you can take home? You cannot take home all those calculations and everything. You cannot take home. Okay, you cannot understand. I know. Even I were at your place, I could not have understood all those calculations. So what message you should take home? The message you should take home is that you have the explanation of structure formation during matter dominated era. You do have. Okay. But you didn't have the explanation of from where actually those fluctuations originated. Because you are starting with initial homogeneous and isotropic. Okay. And this gives you that explanation that even if you start from an initial homogeneous and isotropic universe, the driving candidate is a quantum field which has got quantum fluctuations, and those quantum fluctuations basically exit horizon at very early time, and then after inflation they re-enter horizon at different era depending on their k values. Okay, and those modes who re-enter horizon during matter-dominated era, we can basically capture those modes as large-scale structures. So they basically appear as large-scale structures. And even if they are pretty small, since K is pretty large, they appear as large. Okay, so this is the simple explanation. And similarly for tensor. So this is all about matter. So whatever matter we see, this is the estimate of matter. Okay. I will relate it to observable parameters in the next class. Okay. But right now I have this parameter. I will give you specific values and everything, how to calculate all those things. I will get that. But before doing that, let me finish the business of tensor fluctuations, because whatever I have discussed, that is for scalar fluctuation, but I have got a similar equation for tensor fluctuation as well. Okay. And that equation should result in similar kind of solution. The business is just the same. Okay. So what you can get is that for tensor fluctuations, you have two polarized directions. Okay. Each one will give rise to one solution. As I said, two polarized directions, they can be written as two similar kind of Mukhanov-Sasaki equations. Okay. So that Mukhanov-Sasaki equation is for either for plus or for cross. Okay. So each one will give rise to some amount of PRK. So altogether, how much amount of PRK you will have? 2 into what you will calculate? Okay. So fine. So PT, now we can write it down directly just by similar business. This is first of all 2 multiplied by that factor, which is a cube by 2 pi square, 2 by mp square into u by a whole square. Yes, of course, this is a and this is also a. Okay. If you relate it directly with inflationary model, you can do that thing as well. This is e by mp power 4. So this is the power spectrum participants. Okay, so what we got at the end of the day, first and foremost. So I will discuss the observable parameters in the next class, because then, so if I study it. Okay. So what do we get at the end of the day? At the end of the day, our primary target was to explain that you do have, so if you rely, since we are cosmologists, you will have to rely on experiments. So even in any branch of physics, physics is an experimental subject, so you will have to rely on experiments. Okay. And for cosmology, the experiments are observations. Those observations basically tell you that there is some discrepancies of the standard Big Bang cosmology with observation. Okay. And those discrepancies you can summarize. You can say that those discrepancies basically have arisen. Most of them have arisen because of considering that your universe started from a decelerating phase. Okay. So if you start from an accelerating phase instead, which boils down to a decelerating phase at very early time, then you can show that most of the problems can be resolved. But what you are left with is the most crucial problem, and herein lies the success of inflationary model, that this gives you a natural, so no, there is no one other candidate which basically gives you a natural explanation for structure formation. Okay, lots of propositions have come and they have gone. Okay, so this is the model still surviving today, that this gives you a natural explanation of structure formation. And what is the natural explanation? That inflation is most likely given by scalar fields, which are quantum fields, so you have quantum fluctuations onto them. Those quantum fluctuations basically exit horizon at very early end, and they basically re-enter horizon after inflation at different era. And the modes we see today as large scale structure, they have basically re-entered horizon during matter-dominated era. and they basically appeared as large scale perturbation, whatever I see. If I had done this post-interface perturbation, then I could have shown you directly that these modes actually grow with time. You have to prove that thing. Okay, you cannot be satisfied with this thing that you do have some modes at matter of data. You cannot be satisfied. You have to show that these modes actually grow with time. Okay. Not during inflation era, okay? But in the large scale structure formation and everything else. So these modes actually grow with time. So you can actually have a solution, what I say, a Stokes, Navier-Stokes equation from there, and you can, if you try to solve that equation, you will get two solutions. One gives you constant, which is trivial, and another gives you growing mode solution. And that growing mode solution confirms that whatever fluctuation I have today, that is basically growing with time. So even if we start from a very small value, this has grown during this 13.7 billion years, and it appears as very large structure. Okay. So this is how we can explain, even if we start from a homogeneous and isotropy universe at the larger scale, but at comparatively smaller scales, which are still larger, at comparatively smaller scale, you can have a little bit of inhomogeneities, and which you can measure as temperature anisotropy in CMB. So you can measure it at different era. You can measure it at temperature anisotropy at CMB. Okay, Sheshabji has already explained how you can convert your inhomogeneity into anisotropies. Okay. So you can measure those inhomogeneities as temperature anisotropy in CMB at largest redshift. Then you can measure that through galaxy lensing survey and everything at intermediate redshift, and you can measure them at low redshift through supernovae. Okay, so you can measure everything. The most important part is galaxy clustering, everything, because that part really gives you how it grows, what is its rate, and everything. But what CMB gives you is a snapshot. That is what I am trying to point out. CMB basically gives you, so this is a still picture. It's a little bit, and so very popularly speaking, this is a still picture. Okay. CMB gives you a snapshot of what is happening over here, the earliest possible snapshot. Okay, but that snapshot is really important because that relates the cause with effect. Okay. So next step, I will estimate this parameter at the same time. So this parameter means there are two parameters, power spectrum for scalar and power spectrum for tensors. I will estimate those quantities, I will give their values as of now. Then I will define some more observable parameters which you can reflect on your infrastructure models and everything, and I will give their values, what are the latest values. Okay, and I will possibly define, describe some further avenues which can be studied. Okay, and that basically ends up.